crashing through the lies and disinformation. It's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
Welcome to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight on this Sunday, October 12th, 2014. This is a day people are going to remember. This is the day when Ebola spread itself on American shores. It's the first time we've had it transfer within America. And of course, we've already had the first person get it transferred outside of Africa. That was a Spanish nurse. This is another nurse. And we're going to have a special report from Alex Jones on this breaking story. He immediately filed a report. We're going to have that coming up after the break. But it's amazing to look at the reactions to this. And of course, this is intimately tied with our open borders. This is what I would call open borders 2.0. This is where this is leading. We've been talking about how if they leave the borders open, it's not only going to destroy our country in terms of a Cloward and Piven economic basis, they're also looking at ways to incorporate people into this country who have not become citizens, allowing them to vote. We've even got the Mexican consulate paying to shield illegal immigrants in the U.S. from deportation. That's another story that was up on Infowars.com. That was put up yesterday, actually. We're going to talk about that as well. But let's get back to this Ebola patient. This was transferred today. We learned about it. It was actually, she fell sick on Friday, went into the hospital, and as they reported, she was following procedures as she'd been given it, following protocols. And they say, well, obviously the protocols were violated. Yeah, the protocols have been violated in a number of areas for quite some time. We were called fearmongers here when Alex Jones and InfoWars was talking about not bringing back patients from Africa into the United States and putting them in less than level 4 biohazard containments. We've talked to scientists who do research with Ebola. They were surprised at the breaking of protocols. Other health workers were surprised at that. Even the cleaning guys who cleaned up the vomit on the sidewalk 4 days after it happened, they wore protective suits. Not the cleanup guys who cleaned up the sidewalk. They did not. They came out with just shirt sleeves and with a high pressure sprayer. But the guys that got to come in, I believe it was the next day on Friday, it was a company, I think, called the cleaning guys. They said they took the recommendations up a level from what the CDC was recommending. In other words, when you're dealing with something this potentially deadly, that has such a high percentage of people who fall ill to it die. When you're dealing with something that's that contagious and we don't have it under control in Africa, wouldn't you want to go an extra level and take an extra level of precaution? Clearly, they are not under control with this, both in Spain as well as here. The Telegraph reports that she was taken in, and this is the optimism, okay? Is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? Well, the Dallas officials put a smiley face on it, says she was taken into isolation within 90 minutes of arriving at the hospital. What was she doing before she was taken into isolation for 90 minutes in the hospital? We saw this happen to the nurse in Spain as well. She tried on 3 separate occasions over a period of 1 week to get medical care when her temperature went up. She was somebody they knew was working with the Ebola patient. Yet on 3 occasions, they paid no attention to her. Finally, when they realized that she had the disease and they kept her there, they left her in the emergency room for 8 hours, exposed to people who were coming in as well as to medical staff. When they took her in for treatment, she was so violently ill, she was vomiting and had diarrhea. Bodily fluids were everywhere. Of course, you can get it from just touching someone without getting into that level of exposure. But the doctor who worked on her complained about the fact that his suit didn't have sleeves long enough to cover his arms. That's what we're seeing here. We're seeing a kind of an arrogance from Western governments that this can't happen here. And they're trying to do this partially to contain people, to not allow panic to break out. But it's also gone far beyond that, as we pointed out, to a level of deliberate hubris to casually stand down and not follow these procedures. They're not just telling people not to worry and then behind the scenes doing everything they can and above and beyond. No, they're not even doing that. And so we're seeing this now, the first case transferred to the United States. Stay with us right after the break. Alex Jones, take on it. We'll be right back.
The government's Department of Homeland Security is buying up loads of ammo. At the same time, they're restricting civilians' rights to own and purchase firearms. Can you put two and two together? Infidel Body Armor can stop every round, including hollow points and .308 sniper rounds, is reasonably priced and fully legal. But for how long? Go to InfidelBodyArmor.com, spelled INFIDEL bodyarmor.com. Infidel Body Armor. Just won't quit.
When cells become toxic, they die early and aging sets in. No one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. Just one of the key compounds, BioPQQ, is backed by major clinical studies. You want the best that's out there at the lowest price anywhere? We now have the synergistic solution. Secure your DNA force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139.
Crashing through the lies and disinformation. It's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
It's Sunday, October 12th, 2014, as we issue this emergency alert report. It has now been confirmed in Dallas, Texas, the site of patient Zero's death last week. A nurse who was treating him at the Presbyterian Medical Center in Dallas, Texas, has tested positive for contracting Ebola, the deadly virus, ravaging hundreds of thousands of people right now, potentially could infect millions in Africa. And now it has spread in the United States, just as it spread last week to another nurse, a healthcare worker in Madrid, Spain. So there are several big questions, obviously, here, and several big issues. Why, for the first time ever, are they bringing Ebola patients into Western countries like Spain and the United States? Why, when other nations like England, France, and Arab countries as well have blocked flights out of countries being ravaged by Ebola, why has the United States not halted flights and is still not even doing basic screening at major airports? Another big question, why did Obama lie to us and say virtually no chance it would come here? Why did the CDC say, hey, we can't control the border and we don't think it's going to spread? Why did the head of the Texas Medical Board come out last week and say that there was basically zero chance Ebola could spread when we know it's been spreading like wildfire in Africa? And many scientists, many virologists, even in the New York Times, have come out and said it may have already begun to go somewhat airborne. So to be clear, there is now an official outbreak of Ebola in the United States. And if this healthcare worker was in a full hazmat suit, you better believe that the children, the wife, the neighbors, the children at the school where these other children went are all obviously in danger. And I think it's safe to say what we said a week and a half ago when this news first broke. The odds are this has spread to wider groups of people. And patient Zero, who's now dead, Thomas Eric Duncan, who died last Wednesday, is not the only one. And now that speculation has been confirmed
by the news that a healthcare worker in Texas has tested preliminarily positive for infection with Ebola virus.
CNN headline, Texas nurse tests positive for Ebola, would be first Ebola transmission in the United States. Dallas Morning News, healthcare worker at Presbyterian Hospital in Dallas tests positive for Ebola. CDC protocol breached in treating Ebola patient, Associated Press. And that's the big point that has to be made here out of all these important issues. The default position of not bringing Ebola patients into the United States That was violated for the first time when I pointed this out, when other people pointed this out, when the Drudge Report pointed this out. Mainstream media demonized us and criticized us and said, how dare you not want to bring Ebola patients here? You must be racist. How dare you fearmonger and say people could be coming across the border with it? Well, now a nurse who is in full hazmat gear has contracted it at the hospital where this person was for a week. And remember, they didn't clean the ambulance for days. They sent some of the kids to school for days, even after they knew patient 0, who's now dead, had Ebola. Evidence is also mounting that the CDC is lying to the American people. Foreign press reported that Mr. Duncan had died a day before and that the CDC was basically covering it up, and that forced them the next day to claim that he died Wednesday morning. There's major evidence that we're being lied to. Ebola patients are being brought in. They're not following proper protocols, and it's spreading. And when we point out that the southern border should be highly controlled as well as the northern border, and that everyone who was on this flight with him should be put in containment, we're called conspiracy theorists for following the default federal law. So clearly, elements of our government want this crisis to get out of control. The good news is the head of Southcom, the U.S. military branch that oversees Central and South American U.S. interests, came out last week and said the big threat is Ebola coming across the southern border.
Many countries in the Western Hemisphere have about no ability to deal with an Ebola outbreak. We have a lot of West Africans, of the Homeland Security folks doing their work on our southwest border. Of the number of people they capture, a very large percentage of them are West African. I was down in Costa Rica a couple of weeks ago talking to our embassy personnel. One of them relayed a story to me. But there were 5 or 6 black guys that were there at the border waiting in line to pass into Nicaragua and then on the way north. And the embassy person walked over and just asked who they were. And they said, well, we're from Liberia. Been on the road about a week. And we're on the way to New York City. Illegally. So they're on the network. They had flown into, I think, Trinidad, and then met up with the traffickers, and now they're on the way in. They could have made it to New York City and still be within the incubation period of Ebola. That if there's an outbreak in the Caribbean, particularly, or in Central America, it will make the 68,000 unaccompanied children, I think, look like a small problem.
The UN estimates run from 1.4 million to 5 million people in Africa alone by December who will contract Ebola. Undoubtedly, many of them will try to flee to the West. Other countries, including African nations, are not letting them in because that's default common sense. So now the U.S. is the dumping ground of people who have contracted Ebola, and now it's confirmed to be spreading in the United States. We, the people, have to take action. Call Congress, call the media, call the White House, call the CDC, and say, listen, you follow federal law, you follow the defaults, and you quarantine the people that have been in contact. You shut that border, you stop those flights, or you will be held accountable when this spreads and they're quarantining hundreds of thousands or millions of U.S. citizens and North Americans. This appears to be a false flag that they bare minimum allowed to spiral out of control as a pretext for more medical tyranny here in the United States and worldwide. Finally, I want to leave you with a clip that our reporters got last week with the head of the Texas Health and Human Services Commission, Executive Commissioner Kyle Janik, saying to the legislature that there's zero danger, even if Ebola was on the table right in front of him. It's clear they're trying to pacify the public and cover up what's happening, not to stop panic, but to stop a real response.
There is virtually no risk. You can push me as far as you want to say zero. I will not say zero. It's knowing what I know, there is zero risk. I said it. There it is. I shouldn't say that. There's no risk. There's no risk. Ebola virus could be sitting there, and if I'm touching it with unbroken skin, it's not a risk.
Well, folks, we've put the facts out here. We've been proven right again. Now it's up to you to take action and raise the alarm. We'll take you back now to the radio studio where David Knight is live, breaking this down and taking your phone calls right here in Austin, Texas, and worldwide.
That's right. We're going to be going up to a break in a moment.